Are your people working hard but not reaching their full potential? The problem is not effort, it is development. At the Modern Observer Group, we transform workforce development into real performance. Our human-centered achievement programs help your team think better, communicate stronger, and execute at a higher level. That means higher employee engagement, stronger leadership, and measurable results across your organization. If you want a workforce that performs, leads, and delivers, it is time to invest in your people. Visit modernobserver.com and discover how the Modern Observer Group helps you build a workforce that wins.
We are lighting the candle, a world that works. Hi, everyone. I'm Bill Correll, and I'm here with Jan Jeremias. The two of us are, I don't know, kind of addicted to talking to each other every once in a while and seeing if we can't bring a little empowerment into the world. Interesting day today. But I think before anything else, I did not ask you before we hopped on today. How are you doing, Jan?
I'm here.
And I am so pleased you are.
Well, I'll just say that. I am here.
Yeah. Martin Short has his character. And he would say things like, I'm just so pleased for myself, I must say.
Mhm.
Interesting. Well,
Yeah.
we've been having this kind of saga with automobiles. And I pronounce that like my neighbor. Instead of saga, she would pronounce it saga, which means it's an epic story about different things that are going on with the cars and in and out of the shop and all the rest of that. And so the neat part about it is that it's a metaphor for life, where you feel safe. Your work's been done. You've paid the money. The car's back in the driveway. You go out, you drive it. Everything is beautiful. You drive it all over the state of Connecticut. You come back, and the next day you take it through emissions. And as you're pulling out of emissions, it's the same problem that's been fixed twice before. And each time to get it back into the shop, the first time it cost me about $650. Last time it cost me about $500. At this point, I have a feeling they're not going to charge me for labor any longer, but we're going to get a different part. So,
Yeah, everything is life, just like it doesn't matter, it's just like when you think you've got all your like sort of ducks in a row.
yeah.
And all of a sudden, I had that happen this week with something where all of a sudden I realized something and I was like, all of a sudden it required that I do like 3 more steps, which I thought I was kind of done with the prep work.
Yes.
And I had to step back. And so it was stressful. But then on the other hand, I then switched it to, but at least I knew, because it would have been a whole lot worse
Yes.
had I not realized or had not even thought about what caused the 3 extra steps without being too sharing too much. And so all of a sudden I was like, well, at least I knew, because it would have been a lot worse had I needed it, or they asked me a question about it and then I couldn't come up with an answer, or it would have been like the ramifications would have been a lot worse. So yeah.
Life has those moments, doesn't it? It's kind of like, my thought was when I looked down and I saw the check engine light come on, and then that nasty little message that I've grown to become so fond of, because I've had it on 2 cars. The one car cost massive amounts of money, like $1,700 to get it fixed. And this one, I thought I was way ahead. Both times I lovingly just, handed him the card and away we went. But at the same time, I thought to myself, um, this is, it's not, we're not done. That's really the first thought that came to my mind. It wasn't like, uh, geez, uh, my guy let me down again, or no, none of those thoughts were there. It was like, all right, what do we have to do to get this completely handled? And so I've come back and I've found a reputable company online that will actually rebuild the part, because the part costs $2,000, which is why, my guy has been sort of, kind of like nursing it along. And I don't have a big problem with that. He was really trying to A, get me my car back quickly, and B, um, resolve it with integrity, and have a good idea of what he did and how he did it, which I agreed with. So here I sit, and I'm a proud owner of 3 cars. One's in the driveway and I can't drive it because it only goes in first gear. The other one, we did some serious work on, and we've got it in good running shape, knock on wood. Well, it is what it is. You know what I mean? Uh, we pays our money and we takes our chances. But my wife is driving that car today, and then the other one is in, to get some minor, updates and a little bit of work. It's in the shop today. So I'm going to be in that rarefied era of ordering things to be delivered. If I want any takeout for lunch, it's a little far to walk to any place from where I live, given how bad my knees are these days. But I have nothing but joy in my heart for several different reasons. Because A, God is good and has allowed me to be in a position where I can provide for these types of situations. And my heart goes out to the people who do not have options. And something like this just, it is a month ender for a lot of people these days. A lot of folks I hear that do not have the means, to I don't know. The statistic that comes to mind is that most people don't even have $400 or $500 saved in the bank. Now, I know that's not true for most people my age. Now, you're a lot younger than I am, but the point is, we've managed to get through everything we had to get through up to this point. We will get through this too.
I always, I say that to myself a lot of late, like, you know, that you've made it this far, and through some monumental life-changing things, and you'll get, like I said, I say it to myself a lot to remind myself of that when, when life gets too heavy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's just an awful lot of really cool stuff going on right at the moment. Another snafu was, I've been working on financing for a project that I'm doing for years, and finally got all of the, you say the ducks lined up. Well, I mean, for the longest time on this project, it was, my ducks are not only not lined up, I don't know where half of them are, and there's a penguin in line with the ducks. I have no idea what it's doing here. And that's how it was. But then the stars and the planets kind of lined up in 2-3 weeks ago, and so I'm now just waiting for the funding, to hit my bank account, and then I'm going to have a lot of fun, investing in stuff. So it was supposed to be done a week ago Monday, and then so that got dragged on until Wednesday, and uh, the funding was possibly going to be there on Friday, but no, that was a federal holiday. And okay, so here we are, Monday. It's going to be there Monday. Now it's going to be there tomorrow. Well, I'm in this little zone that's, well, it will be if it is. And if it isn't, not the end of the world. This is one of those labors of love that I've worked on for such a long time. being delayed in the start of it another day or two, or even a week for that matter, Jan, it just wouldn't make that much difference. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that, I don't know that I would have, I don't know how I would react. Um, but I can understand what you're saying. I don't know that I would have that same reaction. Sometimes I do and sometimes I don't. Let's
Yeah.
just put it that way. Sometimes I'm waiting on something and part of me, just doesn't want to think about it anymore. So I just want it to be like, I just want to know it's complete to the
Yeah.
extent it can be completed. So I can like move on to something else.
Well,
And
that's the conversation running in the background.
okay, okay.
You know what I mean? It's like,
Okay, good. Okay, good. Because I
so
was
I
like,
can either engage that, which is not going to bring any fruit until, it does, or I can just, like, sit here and, entertain other things that I can do to bring value to my life and the world,
oh yeah, I'm not saying, yeah, absolutely. But there is a part of you that's sitting there going like, I just want this to be done so I can move on and like and
Oh,
progress
yes.
or whatever. I just wanted to like, I'm doing something with one aspect of my business and I'm still working on numbers and closing out for June. And I'm just like, I wanted to like, I did everything I can do. I sent all the emails I need to send. I'm waiting to hear back from people. I'm just like, I just want to know it's done already so I can move on to July because we're July 6th already. And I want to like,
We, we,
I don't
we
want to
have
be,
this conversation almost every month, it seems.
and I don't want to be trapped into June, I don't want to be held hostage by June.
I
So,
know.
yeah.
Golly. Well,
But and the reason I'm glad we're laughing and we're talking about this, because I think it's so nice to feel like, oh, good, I'm normal. Like other people have these thoughts and other people like have that dialogue going on in the back of their mind. And I'm not the only one who sits there and has these thoughts of like, oh, I wish it was done, or I wish.
well, we're talking about having those thoughts, and I've got this um, coaching relationship that has sort of evolved, and it's a pretty high powered guy, and quite frankly, he very much aware of the circles that he runs in, and he just recently got back from a trip to Italy. He and his girlfriend were there for a destination wedding in Italy, of all places, which was very, very beautiful. And so now he's back, and he's under a timing crunch in terms of lining things up financially to make some things happen. And the, there's another aspect to it because his girlfriend is um, is involved, and she's also, shall we say, kind of got in a habit with him of pestering, if you will, and being concerned about all things financial and what have you. And so the conversation that I had with him was just along the lines of, you've got these deadlines. Let's examine how important these deadlines are. First of all, if this doesn't happen on Wednesday, what's the consequence? And he said, well, not really any, except for I'll let my girlfriend down. And I said, okay. And um, maybe she doesn't understand that what you're waiting for is a huge, huge return on investment for your relationship and your coupleness and your lives from now on. And he said, yeah, I know she doesn't understand that. She just knows that there's a deadline. And I said, well, can you sit down and kind of calculate out what the cost is? Because I guess one of the things that's coming up is a significant and substantial payment on a credit card. Um, I think that the trip to Italy was very expensive, and so I said, you know, how much is due? And he said, well, this is what the number is. And I said, well, what I usually do with that is I cut it in half, you know, and then take 10% of that, and that's typically what your interest is going to be. So let's say on $5,000, it might be somewhere in the neighborhood of about $250 worth of interest for the month at these rates, the way that they are right now for a lot of people. That's another conversation. They're usurious rates. Should be illegal, but they're not. So yeah, he said, when you put it that way, and I said, can you have that conversation and say, hey, look, got really great things happening here. My expectation is it's all coming together in August. We've talked about this for a couple of months. You've kept her up to date on all of that. Can you get her comfortable with the fact that it's okay sometimes to pay a little bit of interest there, as opposed to getting out from something that's going to cost you dramatically if you take money out of the situation now to pay her $4,000, you know, payment? And he said, well, you're making an awful lot of sense. I think I think that's the conversation that we can have, is that this is how things are going to be until August. And we need to behave that way. All right. So I'm probably not being completely clear, but I can't tell you a lot of details without, giving up a confidence. What I've said so far kind of comes down to a relationship between a man and a woman where habitually she operates in a particular way, he operates in a particular way, and there's stress involved around it. So my advice to him is, see if you can figure out the logical answer to the question and satisfy her emotional need, to have this taken care of, and have her decide if it's more important than doing something that's going to cost you both a lot of money.
Uh, and then I think that, I think the only thing that I would add, because I think that, in general, I've always felt that women work more on emotions. And so that whole idea of, security versus, numbers and whatever aren't gonna, unless it is explained in like kind of like a very like, okay, well, this, this is it's not gonna work. But the other thing is to realize that, there has to be, like you were talking about how the money was supposed to come yesterday, it didn't come till tomorrow, it's not coming now till tomorrow or whatever, or today,
Right.
that there has to be a little breathing room around that. Like, this is what right now, this is what's planned and this is what will happen. But even the words that might change depending on, because otherwise, speaking from experience, then you get attached to the plan, or you get attached, and then panic sets in when it doesn't exactly happen. Like, the 1st of August comes around and it's not resolved. And then all of a sudden, a second set of panic comes in. And not to say that that's wrong, just to say that, as much as conversation can be around, okay, well, this is where we're looking so far. And, and we'll see where we are then, or we'll see we are where we are as the time gets closer, not even a date, So, yeah, that's what I feel. It needs to be a little bit of breathing room around that, because otherwise, when you're talking about somebody, like, I like to know things like that. If something is going to happen on a particular date, I'm like, okay, I'd like to know it's complete by that date.
Absolutely. So you can
You
put the appropriate amount of worry into it,
That's right. That's right. Exactly. So I
And see,
can,
that's the whole
so I can,
deal.
just so I can know that, like, okay, well, on that day, I'm probably not going to get a whole lot of sleep, kind of
Yeah,
thing. Plan for
exactly.
that. I plan for that. Exactly.
Well, see, the thing of it is that it's useful to realize that there's two sets of thinking going on for human beings, the right brain and the left brain. And one is analytical and, it likes numbers, and the other one is totally emotional, and it likes feeling safe and comforted and nurtured. And anything that's not that is really scary and can't be tolerated for more than minutes at a time without complaining or, really getting, can you help me out here? The world is falling down because we don't have 25 cents. But the point is, it's real. And as you said before, when you start getting to that panic stage, that's where you have to address the emotion, and not with a story and not with reason. It has to be a more of a, um, like, okay, so tell me more about how you're feeling. Like, express yourself and and give yourself a relief valve and a release for that emotional response that wants to go somewhere. And it's hard to communicate that unless you really give it a shot.
And I think the other thing is, I think most of the time, one of the things I said earlier is really important, and that is that we're not going it alone. And so even if you don't reach out, just that, like, to know people are there.
Yes.
So for this gentleman you're speaking to and his girlfriend, is no matter what happens, we're together.
Yeah.
I think is that, whether it, no matter what happens, is like, we're together in this. And I think there's hopefully great comfort in that. In
Right.
the fact that you're not handling whatever the situation is by yourself.
Yeah. I mean, how it happens around our house sometimes is we'll just sit down and we'll talk about what our roles are, in the relationship. We've got something big, on the horizon, and what do you feel you can bring to the situation, and what would you like to see me bring to the situation? Talk it out in advance, or when there's stress, have a conversation that allows for both the emotional and the logic, to be present in the conversation. But when it's the emotions turn, we use the emotion, and that's the language. When it turns to where the emotion is now in the background a little bit, and it comes down to the what are we going to do, which is the logic side, not how are we feeling about it, why are we panicking, what's the deal, in terms of, it feels like the world is almost over. And then when that kind of goes down a little bit, then you can start talking about, well, what's our first step, what's our second step, the non-emotional part, like the plan. And you have to be at least safe, feeling access to safety to be able to discuss a plan where you've been highly emotional. And that word panic is a very, very descriptive and right on term, because people experience that all the time and they don't know what it is. They just feel sick to their stomach or whatever they're and 9 out of 10 times it's not physical, it's an emotional stimulus that your body is reacting to because it shows up in your body. And I'll tell you what, when you've got someone that you can partner through and basically say, okay, so here's what I'm saying, okay? I'm not going to let anything bad happen to you. I promise you that. And that's a demand note. That's writing a blank check. And when you do that with somebody who you're in a very good relationship with, 9 out of 10 times that's enough. They know that you keep your word. Where there's not been reliability in the past, there may still be a lot more emotion there to deal with. It may be, I hear what you're saying, but what about this? What about that? And people will break down into those whatabouts, in a situation where they're looking for something other than just a verbal assurance about the future. Show me how this is going to work. Show me how we're protected. Let me understand exactly what it is that is going to, what castle are we going to be inside of that no one can penetrate.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that, we all need, to find some some place or someone or something that kind of provides that for us and us for them. Because, you know, I don't know. I think that you can't always be the one who gives.
That's true. And I want to hold open the possibility sometimes it doesn't go both ways. Sometimes the capacity of one person to provide that is so much greater than the other. However, they've got a whole array and buffet of things that really work about them, that in terms of being a whole partner in the relationship, but find it somewhere. That's the point.
And I think sometimes, and it changes depending on what's going on with people. Like, I look at, the really valuable friendships and relationships I have.
Yes.
It's like, okay, well, you're feeling yada, yada, yada. So I'm going to pick up the slack right now because I can. And vice versa.
Yep.
I know you're feeling, um, you're having a hard time. And if you're both having a hard time together at the same time, then you kind of just understand that. And you're like, okay, I'm also having a bad time. And you're also having a bad time.
Yes.
You support each other through that,
Well, people, and you know very well, we just celebrated our 50th wedding anniversary a week ago. And people have asked us over the years, how is it that we are able to stay together when, so many people are not able to? And I said, well, I can't speak for them, but early on, we kind of created a contract with each other. And we made a solemn promise that we would take turns going crazy, that we would not, dishonor the other person by being stingy with the craziness. We would say, okay, it's my turn to go crazy right now. I need you to support me. And that's been very effective for us. We don't have to say that any longer, but there was a period of time, I think when we were in our 40s, we did.
Well, I was going to
Now
say,
it's
and I like the fact that you clarified that, because I think sometimes that's what, you need to voice it. You're like, oh, okay, well, right now I'm feeling crazy. I'm feeling whatever the word is you want to substitute. I'm feeling overwhelmed.
yes.
I have so much on my, I just have so much on my plate. Whatever verbiage, or whatever way you communicate with, whoever it is.
Yeah. And what I like about what you're saying is that the technology, and it is a technology because it's based on empirical data that basically shows a methodology and a series of procedural steps will allow you, when executed to a sufficiency and to a competent level, will allow you to have a good result. And so that can work with a friend, it can work with a relative, it can work with your spouse, it can work with a child, it can work with somebody you've never met before who's in a panic state. It just requires that at some point you make a decision that you're in the moment to make a difference, and that's how you're showing up in the world right then. Somebody, if you go and volunteer to do something and you're over your head at it, good on you for doing that, but don't quit halfway through. Finish the job, stay there until you've accomplished at least getting to the point where things are safe. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. No, I mean, the only relationship you probably didn't mention, and that's because I have that kind of relationship with my mother, and I was really close with my mom. So, it's I'll sit there and, like I think I've mentioned, she'll sit there and say, I know I'm complaining. And I don't look at it like that. I don't really think she complains that much. And so, and I think I'm really, I don't know. I've thought about it a lot, because I have a few relationships where I feel like that it's this way now that I feel like I've really cultivated. And it's just like this feeling of, I'm really good at honoring where she's at. And I look at a few other relationships that I feel like are really strong, and I feel the same way, and then vice versa. But, and if they're not, like, if it's too much, I'll be there and say, okay, you're like quiet, like you have to like give me like let me process this for the moment because you're throwing too many things at me at once. And I need to kind of like, like let me take a breath and think about that for a second, and then take another breath and let me think about that. And I'm much better, clearer now than I used to be at saying that, I think. So it's being it's being able to listen, and it's being able to communicate when you're like feeling like, oh, okay, this is like overwhelming me at the moment.
Yeah. Well, a little further into our conversation about the coaching, there was a conversation about, how she always is and how I always am and all that sort of thing. And I thought to myself and said out loud, what a cool opportunity to do something different. What if you can use this opportunity right now where both of you are feeling stressed about something in particular, and you can use this to increase your relationship tenfold. Where you come out of this conversation with a better feeling and a better idea of what you can count on each other for.
Oh, I mean, that's you know, a beautiful way to look at it.
Well, you go through life, and I know I'm pontificating, so I'm going to stop doing it that way. But I'll say when I go through life, I often feel like I can do it like I'm watching TV with a remote in my hand and, kind of sort of pay attention and not really being involved or have any emotional attachment or any, you know, either idea or preference as to how things turn out. I mean, in some cases, I just want it to stop. When you talk about your mother, watching a parent panic, and they do, and then they know they are, it's a different conversation. And what's really interesting about it, I don't know how it is for you, Jan, but when I found myself in those positions, um, I think my dad was a lot more ready, to allow for the possibility that I may have something really instructive or supportive or something like that to bring to the conversation. A lot more than my mother would have, for example.
For me, it's reversed.
Yeah.
I think, I mean, it's a different relationship, but obviously different people. I'm different than I was with my dad, kind of thing, depending on my age and whatever. But I think for my mother's much more open to hearing options that I might bring up, or like not even when she's in a panic, just when she's going through something,
Right.
and I make suggestions. I think my mother's much more apt to sit there and say, oh, that's a really, that's true. That's a really good idea.
Yeah. So with my dad, it was easy. His his situation in his probably, I guess, his need for any type of support was never about how to do something. It was never financial. It was never what's important in life or any of that sort of thing. In his situation, it was almost always dealing with a new structural physical limitation, such as his blindness or um, not being able to eat certain foods, or when he fell and broke his hip. I mean, all of these are places he'd never gone before in his life, and they were terrifying. My dad is as big and strong a hero as you'd ever want to meet in your life. He was a rear turret gunner on a B-29, and that's where you kind of lay out in this glass bubble with your hands on this 50 millimeter cannon at the back of the plane, as where there's nobody there to support you. There's no guns, that point that direction anywhere on the plane other than where you are. And the plane's flying up at you. You are just like, holy mackerel. Let's see if we can, ring the bell here and get that rear turret gunner. So as far as that goes, when he panicked, it was new for him. It was new for me too.
And I can see that, and maybe that's like, as you say that, maybe that's because a lot of the conversations I'll have with my mom are much more like practical logistical conversations about like,
Yep.
Now she has this new sort of physical thing that's going on, and making suggestions about that. And then also, like I said, a lot of understanding on like, she has something new that she has to do each day, which is very hard for her. As far as like, unless I'm not sure, eventually maybe we would hire someone to help her. But right now she's doing it on her own.
Yeah.
So we're chatting today, and she said to me, I'm going to do it for the first time on my own. Like, I'm going to do it for the first time in therapy. And then I've got to come home afterwards, and maybe I'll do this. And I was very like, right away, I was like very much, well, why don't you see how you feel after that whole like procedure of doing it with the therapist for 2 hours? Like when you get home, see how tired you are, see how you feel before, like, I said. And she was like, oh, okay, that's a good idea. Just to allow her that, I think that to allow her that space even, and permission, because I think sometimes we need permission to sit there and realize that, okay, it's okay to be tired. It's okay to be, to have something new like that, especially when we're physically challenged, to be compassionate to ourselves.
Yeah.
And just sit there and say, and so it was much more like, I think in that way, I'm much more apt to do that, like to remind her of those types of things.
Yeah.
And to be understanding when, when she tells me, I mean, first of all, she's in Florida and it's hot as blazes. So like, she'll sit there and say, oh, I ran 2 errands and then I came home and I was going to do this and this. But I was tired, I was tired because it was so hot outside. And I'm like, Mom, it was 100 degrees and 100% humidity. Like, I mean, it's okay to be tired. I would be tired if I ran 2 errands and, and every time I got out of the car, I was sweating bullets, And so I think it's just those little reminders of like, it's okay. I think sometimes we hold very high, or a lot of times, I mean, or maybe I should speak for myself, we hold ourselves to very high standards.
Yes.
And we compare ourselves to what we were. So we spend a lot of time going, I mean, me included, well, I used to be able to walk at this speed, and now I'm walking at this speed,
Yes.
And so we're in this constant conversation about where we are now and where we were yesterday and where we want to be tomorrow. It's like, no wonder we feel overwhelmed.
I'll tell you what, I lived that personally this weekend. We, my wife and I watched this wonderful movie about this Philadelphia man who tries out for the Eagles when he was 30 years old, and he makes the team. It was kind of like the football version of Rocky. And so there's all of these scenes of football practice and people, blocking each other, tackling each other, all this kind of stuff. And I looked at my wife and I said, I used to be able to do that. And actually I was pretty good sometimes, And she looks at me and she goes, I know you were.
Yeah, it is hard sometimes. It's hard in that way sometimes. I mean, not that you're not thankful for what you could do, but all of a sudden the realization, you're like, oh, I can't do that anymore. It's hard. And so I think that acknowledgement and that just kind of like, okay, well, I'm glad I got to experience it.
Yeah. I think for me now, it's a lot more fun and satisfying for me giving credit, to my body getting me this far. And Jiminy Cricket, with all of the recent passings of folks from my high school class and other people in my life, it just keeps going on, Jan. This is almost like how we met, the whole grief conversation. I don't know if we would have ever met each other had we not had the overlap on the grief conversation. But the point I'm making is now what I have is I have this muscle that I can build being a good friend, or maybe some wisdom gymnastics, or something of that nature. And that means being able to kind of twist myself up into whatever shape I need to in order to be useful, emotionally and otherwise, to folks that are important to me in my life. I think that's kind of a big deal for me. And I think the other thing that's I'm very much interested in is you know being responsible and accountable for how I operate in the world, such that I am not mindlessly responding and just uh, reacting to some kind of stimulation. There was a time when people would be able to say something and it would be like waving a red flag in front of my face for a bull, and I was off to the races. No, up, hey, up, hey, come on back. False alarm. We're not fighting here.
I think that
But
you
now
said something. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, Bill.
I was just going to say, I've trained myself to ask questions. I've trained myself to be really analytical and be, a critical thinker before reacting more often than I, when I decided this was an important thing to add in my life, right?
Yeah, and I think it's just, we talk about this a lot on in our conversation, and it's about being present. Like I went to teach this morning, and this young woman who's adorable walked in, and she's pregnant, and so she's, so she's so she's adorable. And she walks in, and I had said hello, and she was coming in, and then she said to me, "Did you just ask me how I was?" I said, "How are you?" And I said, "Yeah." She's like, "I just assumed that was what you said. Like I wasn't really listening, but I assumed that's what you said to me." And and then she answered, but it was just the awareness that she said, like so much of the time we respond without really thinking, or we're really not listening, and we respond anyway just because we have an idea about what the person said, or we know the person, so we assume we know what they said. And and it was appropriate. I mean, it was the morning, it was after the holidays, so I did ask her how she was. But it was kind of funny when she said it to me, and she was like, "Gosh, I totally didn't hear you, and I just assumed they asked me how I was."
It's an interesting segue from there are so many different schools of thought on the first sentence when you greet somebody. What can you do that would be meaningful and start the conversation in the right area? I know a man who never complained. He just never complained. Every time he said hello, he never asked how I was. He never asked how anybody was. He would always open with beautiful day, isn't it? Or wow, did we need the rain or what? I mean, it was always so opening like that. And if he were to ask like what's going on in my life, that's what he would ask. He'd say, "What's the big thing for you today?" He never asked me how I was. And I asked him, I said, "John, everybody says hi, how are you?" And you don't say that. And he says, well, he said, stop and think about your response. What's it going to be? Fine. So not much information got exchanged there, you know. He said, and the other part of it is sometimes I ask people how they are and they tell me, and it's horrible. And I don't want to hear that.
I think that people, I once went to a talk and it was like, how was, and they got into the whole conversation, like the whole thing was about the word fine and the
Yes.
fact that, like, how are you? Fine. And most of the time, you can even tell by the tone of their voice that they're really not fine at
Well,
all.
that has metamorphosed into a word that doesn't mean anything.
That's right.
Fine used to mean extraordinary, used to mean of the highest quality. It was a fine quality. 50 years ago, 100 years ago, that's what it meant. It didn't mean like fine, fine, can't complain. My life sucks, but I can't complain.
I know. And so that word is like, and that's why I have somebody I know who always says, well, how are you? Well,
Yeah.
and it's interesting as you sit there and if you think about it, like a lot of times if people were to say, how are you? You don't really want to say good because to be honest, you're really not good. Like on somebody, yes, there are good aspects of your life, but you're not feeling it at the moment.
Right.
And so it's kind of like, okay, well, you could say nothing. You could say, I'd rather not say. But if you don't want to say that, well isn't bad. I mean, sometimes depending on who it is, I might say, how are you? Happy to see you. Because that's true.
Yeah.
That's honest. It's like I am happy to see them. And it also shifts it a little bit for me beyond myself, where usually if I say fine, I'm too self-focused. Like if
Yeah.
I'm fine and I'm not really feeling fine, then it's very self, like all I'm thinking about is everything that's going on with me.
Right.
And I kind of bring it out to other people is like, oh, how are you? Happy to see you.
Well, I like the idea of putting some thought into it, so especially with people that you're very, very close to who could probably appreciate the joke. Yeah.
Right.
And if you decide that what you really want to say is how are you, then by all means, it's your world, go for it. I think at the end of the day, whatever comes out of your mouth is going to be the world that you're creating. So if you do it intentionally and that's the best one you got right now, then by all means, let her go. Let her rip. It's nice every once in a while to think things over, isn't it?
Well, I think that, yes, absolutely. And I think it's also not only with what you say, it's like we were just talking about. It's like when you ask somebody you're really interested in what they have to say, or are you
Yes.
just saying it because that's what's said? But like, do you really care? Like, if what? I don't know. Did I share the story about the woman who gave me flowers at Trader Joe's? Did I share
Yes.
that? Yeah,
Say it.
like say it again. So like the woman, so Tonka passed away and I had a big meeting and I go into Trader Joe's where everything happens to me in Trader Joe's. I really feel called to work there, but so far all my applications have been rejected. And so the woman who's checking me out, she asked me how I am and I say, "Oh, okay, well, I have a big meeting today. I'm a bit nervous." And she's like, and then we're chatting and I see this dog tattoo on her arm and I said, "Oh, was that your dog? Is that your dog?" She's like, "Oh, passed away." I said, "Oh, my dog just passed away like a week and a half ago." And all of a
Right.
sudden she comes over to me with a bouquet of flowers. And I was just like, "Oh my gosh." So first of all, obviously, I start to cry, like I'm sitting there in
Oh,
this woman who's so kind, kind of thing. And they're still here. I mean, they're still sitting there by Tonka's picture, kind of thing. But it was this feeling of like, do you really, if someone responds, like she responded, like she said, like she listened. And that's really what meant more, I mean, to me. Like, she probably could have said she was sorry, was really, really sorry, or, we chat because I chat with a lot of checkout people
Yeah.
a lot of the time, just because I want them to feel like they're just not standing there, and I really do appreciate the fact that they're there. So I like to always acknowledge them. But it was just this feeling of like, relationship or just a connection. And so it's like when someone says to you and you ask someone, how are they? Do you really care how they are?
Yeah. I mean, what would you be prepared to hear?
That's right. Exactly.
How about tell me something I'm not prepared to hear,
That's right.
And what kind of question gets you that answer? It's like, do you know Jerry Rafferty and Baker Street? You know that song?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a beautiful song, and the orchestration and the way that it's got a saxophone in it, it's got strings, it's got, and there's a line in it. So where he goes and he sees a friend of his who's got that look on his face. He asks you how you are, and you tell him where you've been, and you talk about anything. All it is the first thing that you say to start a conversation. And back to my friend that was really positive all of the time, and he wasn't putting something on and it wasn't work for him. He would ask an authentic question after saying, "It's a beautiful day, isn't it?" The next question he would say, "What are you up to today?" Or, "What difference are you going to make in the world?" You know? Or, "How can I make your day better?"
I mean, I think that's, I think everybody has their way of doing it. Some
Yes.
people say it, some people write it, you know, some people send a meme, like, uh, and I don't think I'm not saying one is better than the other, but I think it is all about like when we always close and we tell people to reach out. I think that, you know, I do think it makes a difference.
It absolutely makes all the difference. And I do agree with you. We are talking, in the domain of empowerment, but we really realize that the currency of the realm is relationship. It is what can you do to become more related to the people that you care about, or maybe more related to yourself.
That's what I was going to say, more related to yourself.
Yeah.
This past weekend I had like Saturday was a hard day for me. I was missing Tonka so much.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, at one point it thundered and he used to hate, like literally he could have crawled in my skin if if it was possible when there was a thunderstorm when he was younger. I mean, he was
Yeah.
not small and he would literally lay on me, kind of thing. I'd be like, buddy, I can't breathe, like kind of thing, like you gotta get off. And all of a sudden it started to thunder and I looked around. I was like, oh my gosh, he's not here. Like I don't have to think about where he is and is he upset? And where's he hiding? Because he would either hide in my stall shower or he would go upstairs and like hide on this little alcove kind of thing, which wasn't like had no windows. And I had a hard day. And then yesterday, I, I had a choice to make. I was like, do I sit there and stay home again all day? And I got quite a few things done on Saturday. So that was really good. But I was like, do I stay home the whole day and kind of like miss him even more? Because in some ways the house is wonderful because I see him everywhere. And in other ways it gets to be too overwhelming. So you need both. And so I ended up going for like a 4-mile walk with a friend of mine in the early morning. And then there was a pet adoption event. And I knew I wasn't adopting. Like I'm not ready to get another dog. But I was like, I really need to be around dogs at the moment. So I'll go and look at a whole bunch of puppies and then leave, and that's okay. Like I got my puppy dose, like, like,
Makes total
but,
sense.
and then I was like, oh, okay, but it was just like, it's kind of learning that about yourself. So it's knowing yourself, to speak to your point. So
Yeah.
it's like connecting with yourself and, and really examining what you need on a given day. And yesterday I was like, okay, well, I can sit here again today
Yes.
and, enough to say, like, and cry or whatever else I need to do at the moment. Or I can decide I'm going to get out, even if it's just for a little while,
Yes.
and then come back home. And he's still going to, like, I mean, he's still here. And he's still going to be here when I get home, in 2 hours. Yeah.
Right there with you. What's
Yeah.
what I love about what you're sharing is most people go through their entire life and it's ego. It's what really works about you or what is really horrible about you. They've got two ways to deal with the world, and that is to be charming or to go for the throat and be nasty and win, And when you start to distinguish, there's something else there, the self that you were talking about. It's not the ego that's the self. The ego is all the strategies to survive and to get through the week, to get what you want or to keep somebody away that you don't want or something away that you don't want. But the id is another thing entirely. That's where your authentic, like what your core wiring is. What's really important to you? What are you committed to? What are you willing to lay your life out for? And I always have this notion of the self of the ego being the one that we get through by nature. We are born with instincts. We react. And then the other self is the one that we develop over a lifetime when we make choices how we're going to respond to things. The id, where now you're making it a proper noun. It's got a capital letter at the front of it. It's a big S. And it's something that's worth working on. And the neat part of it is there's no attachment to whatever it is as far as you are right now. It's under development all the time. It's a
I like that, land under development. I like that. That was cute. Well,
yeah, we talk about being beings in training, but the point is that when you make a decision that you're going to work on yourself, and we've had the conversation that requires everything, and the notion of self-love isn't giving things to the ego, it's providing the nourishment to the id and to the self that wants to put good things out into the world that you're committed to.
mhm.
So that more of your energy comes from that we've got a job to do. And again, Mark Twain, I love it. The two most important days in your life are the day that you're born and the day you find out why. And I've heard that attributed to Einstein and Mark Twain. I don't know. I never talked to either one of them. So, but I like it.
No, I mean, and I agree. And I think it's really interesting because when you look back at who you were at a young child, who you were as a young child, most of the time when you look at it, that's who you are when you get older. That's your id with the capital I.
Yeah.
It's just that it got covered up by all the messaging that you got, by all the, the people, whether intention, like with your best interest at heart or whether it wasn't with your best interest at heart, like
Yeah.
told you things in your environment that you grew up with. It gets kind of like layer upon layer of, and then the rest of your life, and I've heard this quote too, the rest of your life is kind of getting rid of all that and rediscovering who you really were to begin with,
Yeah.
which is really who you were when you were, 3 or 4 years old.
Yeah.
I was talking to my friend Julie yesterday because my nephew is in his own business and here in Connecticut and is doing quite well, doing very well. He does like electrical and does cameras and stuff for like apartment buildings and stuff like that. So he's doing really well. And so I was saying, and it's so funny because I said, he was the kid. I mean, he could fix anything. He would go to Home Depot when he was 2. It was his favorite store in the world. And it's so funny. Like now I said, well, that gene skipped me, first of all. I said, I don't the handy gene skipped me. But I said, but it's so interesting because when you look back, I mean, that's who he was as a kid. And you see it now. Like, I mean, he was, and I said, it's no different now. He's just like in his late 20s or mid 20s and he's doing it and now he gets paid, but he always was good at it.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. So I think sometimes that, that's always beautiful when when you sit down with somebody and you realize that, Mary Jane, who's been on and who, I mean, she was an artist as a kid. She's still a wonderful artist. It's not like that went away. So
Well, it's funny. We went out to dinner with my stepmother on Saturday, and she is definitely in that zone of being like she was when she was 5 years old. She became totally fixated with this blonde woman. I mean, it was the 4th of July, and there was practically nobody else in the restaurant at all, except for this one couple that was over there. And this woman had really nice blonde hair, and it was perfectly coiffured. And she just got fixated. She said, "You know that woman over there?" And I said, "Yeah." She said, "She looks like Jane so and so, but Jane died." And I said, "Well, it's pretty much not likely that that's Jane." And she said, "I know. She looks so much like her. I'm going to go over and say hello." And I said, "Well, you can, but can you wait until she's done eating?" And so got her off of that for a little while. About 2 minutes later, it's, "That woman looks so much like Jane so and so." She says, "Do you think it could be her?" And I said, "Well, let me see if I understand. Marianne, did you say that Jane passed away?" And she said, "Yes." And I said, "Well, I'm pretty sure it's not her." Okay.
Right.
So finally, we're there for a half hour. We've had all of our food. Finally, the woman that looks like Jane so-and-so stands up to leave. And she weighs about 240 pounds. And she said, "That's not Jane so-and-so." And I said, "Well, you know what? It might have been."
It might have been. Right. I love it. It's so funny. That's very funny.
I mean, literally for like 10 times, I got to go over and say hi to her, and let her know she looks like Jane so-and-so.
Very funny.
Yeah. But you know what? We absolutely love her.
Okay. I think that, a friend of mine and I talk about, older people or people of that generation.
Yes.
And just like I'm going to be giving a talk at at a assisted living, retirement place in, July. And I was talking to the woman from there the other day, and we were talking about how people who appreciate, like, people who work with the elderly love the elderly. Like, I mean, everybody I know who works in a place like that
Yeah.
actually loves talking to people of that age group,
It's nice.
and it's really interesting to me, as opposed to like, because this woman said to me, "Oh, I thought about working with kids and did it a little while and then, and couldn't do it anymore." So it's really sometimes it's kind of interesting that, it's like you kind of choose your kind of the people you want to be around, right?
Yes.
So
Yeah. And there are so many times that you and I are in a situation, especially like for a hospital stay or something like that. And there are people who are absolutely perfect for their jobs. And there are certainly other people that should not be there at all. They're in the very worst possible place. But I think all of that said, the thing that I wanted to say to you today was, I thought about you several times over the weekend from the standpoint of when we were speaking, Janet and I, and we were talking about what we want to do next. She still works full time and she loves it, but there's going to come a time when she doesn't. I don't think she can see that vision for herself right at the moment. But I was thinking about you from the standpoint, you're like I am. You and I will be doing something with people and engaging with people for the rest of our lives somehow, some way. It's just how we get fed spiritually and relationship-wise. She has the same need and desire, and it gets fulfilled every day on her job delivering the mail out in the country and having all these dogs and goats and, people who are there to give her water and lemonade when it's hot and cookies and all that sort of thing. It's very fulfilling for her. And I think the reason that I thought about you was it was okay for me to just hear her. That my job in that moment, I thought to myself silently, do you need a hug? do you need a kiss? What do you need? And so I didn't say those words, but my conversation with her was to allow, to her to just kind of tease out something and just be with her while she was spending a little time exploring.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. Thank you.
Well, I think with all of that said, guess what we did again?
Yep, we did it. Another hour.
And what would you say is the 30,000-foot top line, tie it into a bow sentence that you'd like to leave people with?
I think I would leave everybody with even just a word, and that's connection. I think you said it, Bill, and that was like, it's all about connecting with people and then connecting with yourself and not, and I think recognizing that, so that would be what I would close with.
That's perfect. I have nothing to add to it and nothing to take away. I will say this, though. I appreciate you, and I thank you very much for your partnership in this work.
Oh, thank you, Bill. Thank you very much.
You're very, very welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, we are lighting the candle, A World That Works. And I'm Bill Correll with my partner in empowerment, Jan Jeremias. And we would like to leave you with two thoughts. Number one, connect with somebody. Connect with them in such a way that they know in their heart that you would be there for them if they ever needed you. And number two, please go out and live your very best life and come back and tell us all about it. Bye-bye for now.
Bye-bye, everybody.
You've been listening to Lighting the Candle, A World That Works, part of the Exvadio podcast network. You can catch every episode of Lighting the Candle, as well as the rest of the network, at exvadio.com, the Apple Podcasts app, YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon Music, and wherever you find podcasts.